Hello. Increasingly, I'm not a lawyer. I recorded lawyers how they use remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions. We can discern this. Names of the people of the sciences, certain type of victim slash hyper victim, self-value roles, for example, as the experts on American history, replacing what James Madison demonstrably had to have declassified for himself once he was no longer here. As the only founder, they had the security to let us know the name of specifically. And we were directed to understand that was his plan that caused the Declaration of Independence. And that all the other narratives and natures were part of that plan of the hyperforeign, that which had slavery entrenched, for example, since before they were born, northern colonies and southern colonies. And we know that all the records were hyper criminally foreign influenced. Because sickly distinctly, for example, northern colonies and southern colonies even had roles with changing what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes, and with forcing, tricking, hurting, and persuading others ourselves, to be blamed, even though nature itself was then and is now. Nature itself shows us. Think about what all those crazy laws against the differences multi-front of humanity before America's founders were born entrenched in America. See, this, when I say think about that, everyone thinks about it through campuses A through Z that sickly distinctly taught American history wrong. Because inside the nature of all debate /S are quality aspects of natures that, if defended, that's all the breaching method needs. You guys have self-value collusion /S. With all sides of criminal and civil cases, the interbranch, the intelligence tied to them, foreign and domestic, not one of them had an identity capable of speaking for that name, as what would be patriotism or, the like. We have been systems measured and maintained by a hyperforeign as one syntactically, therefore functionally, tactically ulterior from the Constitution unabridged as nature unabridged. Demonstrations to us how it is a human volume science being a distinct individual human species body made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. And what we are being able to discern is how it is functional, being hyper invisible, but still discernible. Where and how there is one identity of value progression that is not us, but it is us anyway. And it is showing us because it is generating totally different species, individual species. And each one is made up of a whole bunch of different individual bodies. All group differences with the species bodies is volume science. And humanity is in this. In other words, and America first, and humanity first, but there are exceptions. We have to be led by it is functional, how it is hyper invisible, but still discernible. And countries A through Z, suits and ties, counters and exceptions, from America to Russia to Ukraine. The suburbs look almost exactly alike. And there are homes that were built before America's founders were even born. And they had it declassified for themselves. Again, the only one we know the name of is James Madison. Our founders are distinct from everyone, from the presidents and chiefs to themselves who had to be counter-extorted. Everyone had to be counter-extorted using James Madison's plan because everyone was tortured, extorted, and enslaved and rolls with it against themselves. And that was measured and maintained by the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, the crazy countries, A through Z, as systems stay again, tactical terror from A through Z per its system with difference /S. We are showing its difference, that different identity of volume that is a value/value progression generating species bodies, totally different ones, so we could discern its difference, its own body, a value/value progression. The relativity to it to everything as a scientific value has been replaced. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, generated also by this distinct identity of value progression, because it is showing us too it has other species bodies, also with two eyes distinctly but non-distinctly, and simultaneously per itself a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature. English was revealed to teach this way, valuing how other languages were too, and or with nature itself demonstrating, but also keeping exceptions too, because it's also simultaneously never stops demonstrating how it is functional, how its body is distinctly hyper invisible, but still discernible, from how it is invisible, but still discernible. It has three identities of relationship to itself. And English was revealed to really teach this. The parts of speech, like a subject, all the parts of speech are about the invisible, but still discernible, / hyper invisible, but still discernible. We could only appreciate a subject as a part of speech is about the invisible, but still discernible. Anything we could name, like God, that's the invisible, but still discernible, but it is functional. See, the ancient pantheism more probably had the God variable recognized that way, because they were demonstrably and or more probably too, where there are convictions made about what's probable or practical to believe about history, or the value of evidences or research locations originally and still we could observe. They have had roles with fact treatment nature, predicate acts for facts, organized crimes. Collusion / S with part of that thing, part of that breaching method our founders left to classify for us to observe and understand. That which used remotely. Everyone rolls with nature's demonstrations of itself, of a human fact treatment nature breaching method, being and having been leveraged against the human species names A through Z, differences of names A through Z. Northern colonies and southern colonies, and again, then America's founders were born. So everyone already had roles within as economic systems, value systems, tactical terrier from its own. And with short words, therefore their protraction. We can't have two conversations going on. In other words, we don't even have the one hyper native allowed free speech. The breaching method showed all identities of the names of the people, the sciences. They have to pretend they are about free speech. Otherwise, they are censed, including if they as a majority of people. And it is adapted to by the hyperforeign breaching method easily, including if they are everyone from a whole country together, unified voice. Any grouping of countries too, no matter how powerful they could get and have one unified leader, as long as that grouping of countries is entertaining locations, areas, and states A through Z, everywhere their species body is. Styles, needs, nature, syntax, fact-treatment nature, qualities, aspects, nature with convictions, with syntax. Not even formally, but that too, hyper-additionally. This breaching method uses and used already names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the interbranch, the foreign, this is the news, names next to all natures of crime scenes, including body dumping spots years apart, including untimely deaths years apart, and people in the background conversations. There's a predicate acts with facts method / S. The hyperintelligence has discerned. Hyperintelligence has means to discern a list of proofs clearer than day that the lawyers associated with readings of statutes and precedents regarding artificial intelligence, for example. There are and have been collusion / S, for example, also with Whiting forensics, with the World Trade Center attack, And with the hyperforeign, where all the countries involved, their names are used remotely by hyperforeign. And that's recorded, like WFSB recorded this, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. They have collusions, both with the Saudi attackers, as reported. Even if it wasn't Saudi attackers, whatever, the timing of the reported World Trade Center attack. These are names recorded interstates, intracampuses, and intra-campuses, as ones involved also with predicate acts with facts on all sides of the kids' houses, with all kinds of organized crimes roles forced, and acts and methods recorded. The kids will tell you this. The kids who are now adults, the ones who have been pretending other, they recorded themselves going out of their way for fake ties, fake nature ties to me, to others. This is on a mass scale. There are only 3 branches of government and intelligence tied to them. They keep them criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. They knew that nature would show little kids, each in middle age, and adults, how multi-front those differences are being used by a breaching method. But to address that, we address the jobs and titles that come in with passions and emotions. Oh, but that's because that's my job. In other words, we're supposed to address how the jobs and titles have been through systems abridged. The Constitution stands abridged. Trey Gowdy is being used to cover up sequence shifts and collusions with a former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, and people involved with other countries in the news like Russia, Ukraine at the same time. Collusions against their own people with psychiatry, for example. A bunch of people at Hartford Hospital and with the businesses and houses next to it have roles putting fake transcripts in databases with multiple different courts. And their judges and family members, their extended family members, planting evidence on all sides of my fake motivations. That's actually recorded. And they're also shown that such is recorded and they have to, and capable of being discerned. And they have to use everything that comes before them to hide those collusions /S. The collusion/S with the breaching method. Nature itself shows us all those crazy laws against Native Americans against Native Americans. When they help them, we can discern this. You know, against our own black pupils, whites of eyes, communications by nature itself. And we have this separated from the subjects it's inseparable from. Our founders left declassified for us to means for us to force our free speech to demonstrate this. The interbranch have been lying about what they think about their personal, when it's personal against them, because they were child abused. We could observe how they had other taught for them. But they don't want the forgiveness. They want and need to cover up what they already had collusions with. That's why they can't get on paper one name and sequence. Anyone could free the whole world. You know, we just change the natures of all kinds of things. Okay, how much money they owe in America and in Russia, the people associated with medical campuses and fire campuses, using those things to hide life progressions as their roles with the identity theft, fraud, slander method, replacing what the humanity is about, the species body of individual bodies, our right and obligations to discern to the extent we can the identity of value /value progression generating species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies. So we can discern its individual identity of value /value progression. Please get me off the fake conversations with WFSB, Channel 3 News, Connecticut. The differences of the guilt of the intelligence at their location or of the intelligence next to them through time. They also have collusion with victims advocates through time, through multiple involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, sexual and medical offenders of kids. Joe DiMauro had a mercury in his hand one time. I only know him recorded involved with planting evidences. And they hid this and all kinds of things that are actually recorded from my parents as their roles with their educators behind my back. I didn't have class with Joe DiMauro. They tried to make a fake exception with a middle school class increasingly Mr. Neville, with people all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, a whole bunch of people tied to him have roles with predicate acts with facts at other campuses I went, and interstates, intrastates. I never had a verbal conversation with him. I had one sentence. I asked him why he didn't give me back my palm. He never answered. A whole bunch of people tied to a Leahy family too, where I recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with this Mr. Neville and his roles with all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that. And a police chief, Cintron, has roles with people from Puerto Rico named Cintron, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, and child offenders, leaders of kids years apart, involved with retired Wethersfield police chiefs and their intimate ties, time collusions, inter and intra-cities and inter and intra-campuses with the same house, involved also with falsified police reports with them, with multiple police departments forging and switching names, and the courts, and personally the roles of with private, with civil and criminal cases, with names on all sides of the criminal and civil cases, including a case in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center attack towers. Right before that case, the court itself, and names on all sides of that case, their sources, people tied to them, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to self-buy rules with sequence ships, identity theft, fraud, slanders, acts, and predicate acts, collusions before and after the World Trade Center attack, interstates and intercities, with the ones inter and intra campuses, involved with differences rackets too. A whole bunch of people involved with these Mendez police too, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, their family, and people associated with them, intercities with the Britain Superior Court, next to Fox Connecticut News, involved with people with the name Domain too, and Jewish themed, and Catholic themed, and other religious differences themed people, and people atheist themed, time collusions with their differences, on off Central Connecticut State University. There's someone with the name Wayne, knows my name, I don't know his name. He's involved with the agencies, and the Dean Judd, involved with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, their family members, all sides of criminal and civil cases and depositions. They had collusions at West Hartford and town lines, like next to Central Connecticut State University, and the intelligence at Central Connecticut State University. The same names recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they were influenced in roles of predicate acts and murders. Investigators used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, untimely death roles. The same ones involved with untimely death at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, were involved with all kinds of organized crimes and predicate acts in my street, in my area. With I never saw a Joshua Stryker on my street. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders in me behind my back since I was a kid, with leaders of the kids, with kids of and families and ties to the leaders of the schools and their kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, their family members, a whole bunch of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people involved with UPS and shipping locations, and his roles also with the F.B.I, with people on Fairlane, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people involved with home break-ins tied to this Joshua Stryker. I don't know him. They brought him into it, and Eric Oliveri too. Others at Trinity College have been identity theft, fraud, slanders, planning fake ties, fake nature ties to be on my street, tricking me to a location because they can pretend in the future, but they can't admit on paper. These are people where they use the right to live. Increasingly, the state judicial branch offices has roles also with the educators of these people, inter and intra campuses with identity theft, fraud, slanders acts. Relative to the subject, it's everything we have to appreciate it this way, because that's one of the things that is being demonstrated to us. We're how being demonstrated to us. Our suits and ties, counters and exceptions as collusion /S with an array of opinions, dishonestly defended, pretending voting means what it doesn't. That's one of the styles on a mass scale they use to pretend when they were faking and changing what people say with short words, so they could self-buy rules too, with the collusions with the people changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded, like with whiting forensics. Whiting Forensics, FBI, and CIA have the Facebook pages of New Britain Superior Court, of a principal upskirt nature, Highcrest School, and other campuses. They have the Board of Education. Wethersfield Police Facebook page has a Joshua Julian, also involved with medical and sexual offenders of kids, with an officer Poisson, Poission, changing and faking digital evidences with a principal upskirt nature, more sexual and medical offenders of kids, changing and faking digital evidences with Whiting Forensics, and a Joshua Julian on the Facebook page of the campus. And a bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court, their family members, and their intimate ties, involved with retired police chiefs, and the same house/S with people involved with predicate acts with them, with multiple police departments, and roles criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and their roles with Elm Streets and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, increasingly being recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, tied to people intercities and on-off campuses, putting predicate acts with facts. Collusion/S with influences from off the campuses, but also worse than just the ones acting there. This is an outcome that is manifest at countries A through Z. In other words, this breaching method wrought natures of industries, natures of logic that can't defend themselves and afford not to self-value. Collusion/S with predicate acts with facts and databases, fake transcripts, and use/S of that collusion/S. Again, murders, untimely deaths, years apart, that were brought up at the same time with the inter-campuses connected predicate acts. Untimely death at Trinity College, even if it was made up. FBI Director Robert Luskin, non-verbally recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Collusion with people involved with that. Intercities on my street in Wethersfield. They have rules with the police forms and the FBI director, and people with foreign and domestic military, overt criminal enterprise, private ones at the same time. These are also people next to medical campuses in New Britain, Hartford, like Hartford Hospital, and the houses and businesses next to them, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. People that are just traveling by, like journalists and their family members, their educators, involved with predicate acts with facts, organized crime acts and methods. See, this breaching method made all collusions with its method. It made all identities of integrity and defenses of that force to be to have that self-value, where the defenses can't get away with it without self-value, and with the breaching method has set up. Like, for example, replacing with James Madison and our founders, plural, behind him and his plan, communicated for themselves and for us. So get me off the fake conversations with WFSB and Rocky Hill, Channel 3 News. They increasingly have people involved with Mercury and messing with the sense and sensibilities of English teachers I had, multiple, and science teachers consciously to make the groups to have people verify things through others on a mass scale. All natures of investigations, investigators, they're only capable of having been used remotely while criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, / hypercriminally foreign influence, and pretending other. In other words, forgiveness is relative to how this is an outcome affected, relative to their use / S recorded of those principles with American history teachings that can't be defended and afford to be, let alone to protract short words with proper treatments by James Madison's plan. You guys aren't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, or it would have brought this up. How George Washington was using James Madison, his plan, and the founders behind him that we don't even have the means to know the names of. And that plan was to counter-extort everyone else, force them to break the crazy laws, not just of the internationally monitored conversations measuring and maintaining collusions. Otherwise, everyone's self against themselves and everyone else. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, and even worse. Not just that, that's the same thing as the overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists originally and still. When did the breaching method stop using those differences of guilt, collusions only allowed to be? To stop, why did it stop hiding behind and through that? So we're going to pay attention to what designed the suburbs, because that's what designed the cities right through our own law. Ugh, vaccine. It's not about who knows this and number. It's about what's true always. That's how it is functional. So you guys want to make every nature of difference. Who tries to speak about that difference with nature unobstructed, that body's going to be attacked. So they could keep, and the only counters and defenses, for example, collusion. The collusion is way beyond this, but like we're on a mass scale where people make voting what it isn't, because they can't afford to have mandated law followed properly and with care. They can't afford to have people, but they have the right to call out, like with the telephone. They have torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery, and murder method collusions, even with the crime scenes of years apart. They forced the principal child abuser, leader of kids. You think all of a sudden they're going to care about morality? People in prisons, they don't like child abusers in prisons. This breaching method showed everyone it makes fights between everyone or unities where it uses insidiousness natures of positive or negative syntactical appreciation to measure and maintain itself left out, even though nature itself is showing us all those crazy laws that were entrenched in rules with it, and then marriage found were born. They were about a human fact-cheating nature breaching method, even how sickly distinctly each. And Native Americans see president / chief because nature itself and our founders, they left us to appreciate, understand the Constitution and in other words, they are our founders, plural. They're part of it. We don't know the specific name. There are proofs that there was at least one tribe that was a part of that plural behind James Madison and his plan that enabled it to be strong enough to even do that semi-damage control. They had to leave slavery entrenched southern colonies against themselves too. Torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery, therefore physical slavery method. We were supposed to understand why and how they had to leave that entrenched and how a breaching hyperforeign was using it. We're supposed to understand how the hyperforeign needs things like criminal foreign influences to stay blamed. When it built that, only capable of being. It built all counters as collusion /S. The state judicial branch offices and corrections offices never stopped being and haven't been used remotely criminally foreign influence / hypercriminally foreign influence. This is why, and this is discernible, but you guys have to follow mandated law. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. They have increasingly collusions with victims advocates with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and child abusers, leaders of kids years apart with the same ones involved with that. A whole bunch of different countries. In other words, watch what I caught them doing with the fire departments and their family members, multi-front.